Welcome to Decoding Healthcare Research, a podcast by Agora Project. Join us as we delve into the behind-the-scenes world of groundbreaking research and the dynamic healthcare industry, interviewing top paper authors, engaging experts on industry-related topics, and exploring medical subjects that affect our daily lives. And now, your host, Dr. E.F. Rain.
Welcome to Decoding Healthcare Research. I'm Efrain Riveros, Dr. E.F. Rain. Today, we are going to be talking about emotional eating in the context of psychological distress, what happened during and after the pandemic of COVID-19. To discuss this important topic, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Elaheh Arjmand. She's a Ph.D. candidate and researcher at the Department of Addiction Medicine at Auckland University Hospital. And also, she has affiliated with the Department of Global Health and Primary Care at the University of Bergen in Norway. We will be talking about her vast experience in this research. Especially, we will talk about a paper that she published in the journal Nutrients in 2023. The title of the paper is Emotional Eating and Changes in High Sugar Food and Drink Consumption Linked to Psychological Distress and Worries, a cohort study from Norway. Welcome, Dr. Arjmand.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So I think it's a good idea to start talking about the cascade of events that happen when you are exposed to psychological distress and how this is a trigger for emotional eating. Where is the connection there?
So emotional eating is a cycle that can happen to anybody. It's not defined as an eating disorder. It's like it's when you tend to eat not because of hunger and physiological needs, but when you feel bored or you feel sad or any type of emotions that triggers you to eat certain type of foods. And then these type of foods are usually unhealthy choices like cakes, biscuit, ice creams. And a lot of studies recently has shown that psychological distress is linked to this cycle. So you feel distressed, you tend to eat maybe a high amount of food that are unhealthy. And after that, you feel sort of shame or sadness because of that behavior. And this cycle continues. So that was one of the reasons that we try to focus on this because we saw a high amount of psychological distress in the beginning of the pandemic, and we wanted to see, does this affect people's eating behaviors, and do people tend to eat more because they are distressed because of the pandemic and being socially isolated and being in quarantine.
So you would say that there is a cycle that is initiated by a negative emotion, and then as a coping mechanism, the consumption of these foods or this unhealthy habit compensates for that, and you achieve like a new equilibrium. Is that the
Yes,
right way?
emotional eating is categorized as one of the maladaptive coping mechanisms. So, like this is how we try to cope with certain situations, and because it's maladaptive, yes, it's not going to benefit us. It's maybe it even triggers us to to continue that unhealthy behavior that can affect our health.
And it's associated with the high sugar foods and drinks, right? So I assume this is because there is a biochemical mechanism underlying.
Yes, that's actually very interesting. So when I was reading about the backgrounds of emotional eating, it's not defined as only negative emotions links us to be like being like eating a lot of sugary food, but it can be also positive. Like you feel happy, you feel like you have an accomplishment, and you want to eat a cake. And usually it's because sugary foods have this sort of potential for dopamine release, and like we have a we can experience sort of satisfaction after eating a lot of sugar. But it's not just that. It's like it depends on individuals' choices. Like a lot of people tend to sugar foods, but some people have like salty options also.
I
So
see.
it's like a variety of choices that people can have.
Now, coming back to your study, what were your objectives when you conducted the research?
So these objectives, first there was a cross-sectional study being done in the beginning of the pandemic. After 6 weeks after beginning of the pandemic in Norway, that a lot of schools were closed, like people were in quarantine. My colleagues did this study to see the dietary habits, what was happening back then. And after 2 years, we wanted to see, are people still doing that? Are people still doing emotional eating? Did they have weight change? What is happening now that these social distancing is gone? Like we are not saying that the pandemic is over now in Norway. We are saying that it's like a different phase now because we don't need to wear masks, we don't need to like work from home, but still there is we have some cases here. But in 2020, like there was a sudden disruption of daily life. Like people couldn't have their daily activities. Like they had a lot of unstructured time uh, in their daily life that they didn't know how to about what to do. Like the usual activities were gone, um, and the objective of this certain paper was to see the changes.
To see the changes over time. And this is very interesting. Actually, one thing that caught my attention is that you not only focused on the high sugar foods and drinks, but you also measured the consumption of fruits and vegetables as a surrogate for healthy foods.
Yes.
And that's interesting because most studies focus just on the high sugar food. So why did you guys included the fruits and vegetable too?
We discussed this with my colleagues that when we want to talk about eating behaviors, we can't just single out one food group and just talk about that because, like on our daily life, I think everybody have experienced that we eat a bar of chocolate, but we also eat a lot of other things, and the health outcomes is not only dependent on the unhealthy food options that we have. It's like a sum of all the things that we eat daily. So we wanted to talk about uh, like food choices in general and have an example of unhealthy food options and an example of healthy food options because also during the pandemic in this time that people were spending in their home, we also saw a trend happening that people were like baking their own bread, and some people had this home cooking videos. So we wanted to see if also they increase their consumption of healthy foods, and is this like it does this balance out the emotional eating that is happening?
I see. How many participants did you have in your study, and how did you sample them?
So in this city that we are located, we have a total population of around 200,000 people. So we sent out an invitation via email to 80,000 people, and around 24,000 replied and agreed to participate in our study. And we sent a questionnaire. We have this here. We have like a online questionnaire system that they can fill out, and mm, so at the baseline, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had around 24,000 participants, but we followed them up every 6 months, and the last time point that we had was in 2023.
In 2023. So how many checkpoints One at the very beginning, one in the middle, and the other one in 2023?
We have so the whole project is called Bergen in Change study, and a lot of people are working on that from different institutions. So this is like larger than our study. What we have used is a baseline, a 1 year follow-up, and a 2 year follow-up.
I see. Excellent. So, what about the primary outcomes? What were the outcomes for your study?
For this study, our outcomes was changes in emotional eating, and changes in consumption of high sugary food and drinks, and changes in consumption of fruits and vegetables. And we wanted to um, uh, analyze the associations between these outcomes at baseline and the trends over time, like how did they change over time.
And what did you find?
So we found out that at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a trend, a high consumption of high sugary foods and drink, and a high prevalence of emotional eating, and also consumption of fruits and vegetables were a bit low. But we don't have the data from before pandemic, so we can't say that was it like the changes from before the pandemic. We can just say it was like high and low. And at the baseline, emotional eating was strongly associated with high psychological distress and worries about health and economy situation. Um, Also, high consumption of high sugary food and drinks was also linked. There was like a similar associations between the outcomes. And also, consumption of fruits and vegetables were lower between those individuals who had high psychological distress. There was like some associations between demographic backgrounds, like females tend to eat more fruits and vegetables compared to males, and also females also uh, eat and drink less high sugary foods and drinks compared to males. Unfortunately, but emotional eating was higher in females than males at baseline. So these were like a main baseline outcomes. And the time trend, fortunately, was that emotional eating was uh, was decreased over time, over years. So at after 2 years, it was kind of like back to normal.
How do you explain that change in the association? How do you explain that the association became weaker and weaker over time? What is the rationale behind that?
Um, we can't say that the association got weaker, but for this analysis, we had to have some variables that are constant, and the outcome is the only thing that is changing for the mathematical to work. So we did some background analysis about the changes in psychological distress over time, and we saw that over these 2 years there was some fluctuations. Some people had decreased, some people were increased, and some people just stayed the same. Uh, but we assume that psychological distress is constant over time to see the changes with psychological distress, assuming emotional eating is the only thing that is changing. So we saw that this association is decreasing. Like uh, this is like it's showing that uh, if we assume that it's like a line, the angle is changing, something like that.
I see. And I see also that you mentioned in your paper very interesting associations between the hypothalamic pituitary axis
Yeah.
and what you found in your study, and trying to find an explanation to your findings. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the role of hormones, in this particular case, cortisol, and your findings?
Yes, I see your point. So we try to come up with explanations for what is happening, and one explanation is about our hormones, and we have this we have like a axis in our body that is linked to hypothalamus, hypituitary, and our adrenal. That when we are stressed, a stress hormone released into our body, and it can change our satiety cues. Like we can feel more hungry, or we can tend to eat more sugary foods or change our food choices. And this is one of the explanations that we can have to see the change in eating behaviors during the stressful times, not only pandemic, but every situation in our life that is stressful. But also, this is like a kind of tricky to talk about because we didn't measure these hormone levels. So another explanation that we had was about coping mechanisms and like how people adapt to situations. When we are suddenly experiencing a change in our daily life, we tend to have maybe a healthy or unhealthy coping mechanism. But over time that we are experiencing that daily, uh, we have this, human beings have this ability to cope with the situation. And we have like, we can check with ourselves that what is happening. And for example, we have this worry that we are going to get sick, but for example, we get vaccinated, we are seeing that the situation is changing, and then our body changes the coping mechanism.
So yeah, there is also some adaptation over time. The way you perceive stress over time, definitely. Going back to the biochemical mechanisms, there are multiple publications recently associating the peaks of insulin that happen after you consume a sugar-rich food and your emotional state. Is that something that you would use as a complement to your findings, the role of insulin in the same context?
That's very interesting, but I don't think that we can add that to this study because like the questionnaire was like digital. It's because of
Uh-huh.
the method that we use. But that's actually, yeah, something that I want to know more about.
Absolutely. So based on your findings, what do you think is the key finding, and what is the takeaway message in this case?
Personally, I think the key finding here is psychological distress is can happen after a certain stressful situation, and this is like a reason for a lot of changes in daily life and also behaviors. One example is dietary behaviors, also other coping mechanisms that we have. And I think it's important for like clinicians and also policymakers to know the importance of psychological distress when they're addressing the public about the guidelines. Because we have in our guidelines that, okay, just stay home, or for example, don't eat unhealthy foods. But the problem, the background is distress, and they are like the cognitive inhibition is gone when we are stressed. And I think we were talking about this during the in the pandemic center here, that uh, when policymakers try to address public, they should also talk about how coping mechanism, like, okay, if this is not an option, what is an alternative? And I read about emotional regulation techniques that people can use, sort of like applications on their phone to try to soothe themselves, like instead of sugar.
I see. You mentioned that that this project is part of a large clinical trial that you guys are conducting. What else are you doing in terms of research regarding this topic?
Yeah, this is like a cohort study, so there is no intervention, so we can't call it clinical trial. The large project is about not only diet, so we have data on alcohol consumption, physical activity, like use of nicotine products. Also, we have like subgroups that we want to see what's happening in for example, migrants groups in Bergen, also like the differences between different economical levels and situations that people have. Yeah, it's like I don't have like extensive knowledge about all the aspects, but other people are working on that.
And along the same lines of the post-pandemic stage, are you planning to continue doing some research about this topic over time?
Um, I think the last questionnaire was sent to the participants in 2023. I don't think now they are going to continue with that.
Okay.
So we are in the just analyzing phase. It depends on how things go. Like if the pandemic continues, like if it has like another phase, maybe they will do that. I don't know.
And it's quite intriguing to see, and I think actually that's the main value of your study, that we see how eating behaviors can be linked to emotional stress, but you evaluated that in the context of something that is affecting many individuals at the same time. It's not just a stressful situation for a single person. So it has to do with the population dynamics, the way a group of human beings respond to stress and how this affects eating behaviors. And in the end, that becomes a public health problem. And I think that's very interesting, and is actually something that your study shed a lot of light on. And I think that that is a good way to wrap up our conversation. And first of all, thank you so much for being with us today and to share your knowledge with us. This is going to be very enlightening for our audience, and for our audience. Please don't forget to give us feedback about this episode, and in the description of the video you will see the link to the paper that we discussed today. See you in the next episode of Decoding Healthcare Research. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you for having me.
Arjmand.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or thoughts about today's topic, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave your comments down below. For more information and references related to today's discussion, you can find them in the video description below. We appreciate your support and look forward to having you back for our next episode.